You're listening to the Staffa Corner Podcast, a Staffa-tarian look at entertainment and life with your host, Greg Staffa.
My guest tonight is legendary Stuntman. You've seen him on shows like Blacklist, Purse of Interest, Limitless, Netflix's Daredevil, assortment of movies including John Wick and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'd like to introduce Pete Klein. Pete, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure, Greg. It's great speaking with you.
Tell us a little bit about your background growing up before you got into stunt work. I know that you worked for CBS Sports.
Yeah, for a long time.
What goes from that into stunt work?
Well, I always kind of liked the idea, I won't say always, but after graduating from college, where I went to school at Boston College, I came down to New York and through a couple of other jobs, kind of decided to focus on working in television. I was an athlete in college, played football at BC, and thought that was probably the easier way into the television industry, and got work first with their research with CBS Sports research staff, and then moved on to their graphics department and had a couple of positions there. But that's kind of that was always sort of like freelance work, and left me a lot of availability to do other things, and part of those other things were sort of chasing down a childhood dream of becoming a professional stuntman.
Wow, that's quite the leap. And I guess my biggest question for someone like you is, what is the definition of a stunt? I mean, when we think of stunts, we think of a guy falling off a 10-story building or a massive car crash. It's a little more complicated than that. What is a stunt?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of times that's defined by the Screen Actors Guild. In regards to doubling, is something that an actor shouldn't be doing, basically, because of various danger levels or things like that. But you're right. I mean, there's a pretty loose interpretation of what could be considered a stunt. And not all of them are big falls like 10-story buildings and car crashes. Sometimes it's a little more simplistic, and that could be, it could be something as simple as running down the street and dodging a couple of pedestrians, and those pedestrians might be stunt people as opposed to background actors, depending on how physical that's supposed to that shot's supposed to be. So you might have a stunt person double in just for example, like a 70-year-old woman who's got to somehow run down the street and get out of the way of pedestrians and things like that. And you might have 3 or 4 stunt people working in that scene, and you throw a car in there or something like that, or a bicyclist, and there's a couple more. So it could be something more or less complex and less physical, such as that, or you could have your car crashes and things of that nature.
So now, are stuntmen kind of the doctors of film? And what I mean by that is, nowadays you used to go see a doctor and he would do everything. Now there's a throat, ears, and nose specialist. There's a orthopedic specialist. There's a specialist in everything. When you say you're a stuntman, do you have like a specific, I'm the this and that guy that they hire when they need someone to do this and that? Or is it pretty much, once you break it down, stunts are pretty much stunts?
Well, I've always felt that it was best to be a generalist in that regard. That's not the case for everybody. Some people are really, really great drivers, and they might not be the best people for fight choreography, for example. Those are 2 very different, distinct skill sets. So, I think that's a very easy example to strike. But My goal was always to be able to do everything, and there was a point in the a time in the industry where if you were going in for an audition, they would ask you a question, something like that, in regards to your ability, and the proper answer would be all expected abilities. So that was something that I kind of carried with me, and tried to get to that point, across all the different areas where a stunt person might find themselves in a day's work.
And many people, I think, just casually would assume that you're a thrill taker, a risk taker, someone that likes the kind of adrenaline rush. But usually it's a lot more broken down and structured, I would imagine. What goes into you wanting to be a stuntman? I mean, is it a thrill, or is it more scientific of, angles and this is how you fall properly? If I do this, the risk is minimalized?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more calculated than thrill seeker type Daredevil stuff. The stunts that we do for TV shows and things like that, or, if it's fight choreography, it's usually rehearsed pretty well. Not always for television shows. You don't have, 2 or 3 days to work through choreography always, but just because of the nature of the scheduling. And of course, budgets play a part in that now, more so than ever, I suppose. My background as an athlete was the thing that kind of drew me more and more to this. I'm certainly not a thrill seeker type. Never been bungee jumping. I've never been skydiving. Those are things that, people often associate with that type of mindset. And like I said, my background was more as an athlete, and that was sort of the approach that I took and continued that with, even as I became a stuntman, and applied that in terms of training and preparation and things like that. And then again, expanding my own skill set to do as much as I could possibly do, whether that was rigging, driving, fighting, falling. I did a bunch of water rescue training in a couple different areas, and that's sort of the approach that I've taken. Again, like more of an athletic type of approach.
Now, do you think stuntmen are kind of becoming unappreciative? I mean, when you look at even something like IMDb, a lot of your work is uncredited. You gotta say to yourself, "Hey, I took a fall or I took a punch for that. That should be credit." Why isn't there more admiration for a skill?
Yeah, I don't know that you'll find that as much in the case of people who are doubling actors. But I do think that happens because a lot of times the stunt cast list often gets blown up because of these massive, scenes that might be crowd scenes. I think of Batman, The Dark Knight, massive crowd fight scenes, right? And I didn't even work on that those particular days, but I do know how those were planned for and things like that. So, the idea of listing, or crediting even appropriately, I mean, because they do get listed on services like IMDb and stuff, crediting those properly, you're talking about a massive list that's added to the credit roll. I mean, you just can't always fit that stuff in there. I don't think it's practical.
What's been your favorite day on a set, or something that you can watch that movie or watch that clip and say, that was me, and I can't believe I did that, or that's my proudest? Is there a proudest moment, or is it just a job, going to work?
Yeah, no, I mean, the stuff that I got to work on, and the stuff I got to do in John Wick, the first John Wick, was really something that, I mean, I was part of the Taurus Award winning fight team for that film, and working with some really incredible guys from the 8711 fight team, and the directors Chad Stahelski and David Leitch were founders of that group. Then went on to become directors, of course, in their own right. But that would be the work that I would say really, to me, I feel pretty great about. I mean, that fight scene that we won the award for, definitely, I think I died several times in that scene, just as the way we're, sort of recycled as just masked bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But probably like a close runner-up would be the stuff I've done on the Netflix Daredevil series. Again, part of that pretty iconic hallway fight scene from the first season. And working with guys like Phil Silvera and the whole group that we had assembled there for that fight was pretty awesome. And Chris Brewster as the Daredevil double was incredible. It's just the amount of beats that he had to just internalize and hit for that shot to work as a oneer. The no cut type shot was just incredible.
And they've tried to recreate it several different times, but never to that extent where and maybe we just got so used to it after that scene. But that scene down that hallway is just one for. So to be a part of that, wow! Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thank you.
So you've also been in shows like Person of Interest, Limitless. Can you tell us a little bit about working on those?
Yeah, Person of Interest was great. It had a nice long run. Blacklist was was probably a show that I've worked the most on, apart from the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and they're much different types of shows. But I got to double Ryan Eggold for several seasons during his run on Blacklist, and working with him was very cool, and we got to do some pretty cool stuff.
Now, when you work with someone like Ryan and he goes on to do another show, do they ever say, hey, my stunt double for the Blacklist was Pete. Can I get him for New Amsterdam for a scene that I need to do? Or does it become kind of that camaraderie when you're working with an actor as a stunt double versus just being a stuntman on a show?
Yeah, I think it typically does. If particularly if that's a relationship that stretches over the course of several seasons, or at least several weeks. Sometimes it all just sort of depends on the story arc, I think. But yeah, I mean, in the case of Ryan, I developed a pretty good relationship with the guy, and although I couldn't really double him on anything that they did on New Amsterdam due to an injury and stuff. He's still somebody that at that time in both of our careers, we were really good working together.
Nice. And what kind of work did you do in Person of Interest?
Gosh, I mean, everything, we did that had a pretty nice run here in the New York area while it was being shot. So I didn't double James Caviezel very often, maybe once or twice inserted there, where the regular stunt double Tony Vincent had to either be in a different place at a different time, or doing double duty somewhere else. But apart from that, I think it was just a lot of regular bad guy, wrong time, wrong place type of stuntman stuff.
That show has some of the best fight music of any TV show, I think.
Has it? You think so?
Just the way that when things get going, it played the same music all the time, and you can just hear it in your head. Caviezel is someone that I've always wanted to interview. I got to say hi to him once, but all these days it's just...
No, he's fantastic, and he really, seeing him work through fight choreography and how he internalizes it, and, him working with Anthony Vincent on all that fight choreography and stuff like that over the run of the show was really cool process, and he got very, very good at it.
Now, are you able to sit back and watch a series? Because, like, Person of Interest and even Blacklist is something that I guess I think of as having a lot of stunt work or having a lot of, fights and stuff like that. Is that a show that you're able to sit back as just a guy and watch and not be all like, ooh, he threw it there and that's where he pulled it and that's where are you able to watch and enjoy it as a fan, or is it too businessy to look at?
Funny, I haven't watched a whole lot of the stuff I've worked on. So there are moments where I see things that I did do, or even, watching shows, where I know the people who were the stunt people, I enjoy it as a fan. I don't pick it apart. I don't, look for mistakes or anything like that. I really like to watch it and just kind of be in the show. And it's cool to recognize, a guy or a girl who is doing a stunt and say like, oh yeah, there's whoever it is. In that regard, it's very cool to just know the people. And certainly if it's a bigger stunt and and you kind of have some insight as to how they did it, or even curiosity as to how they might have done it, that I think that's different than trying to pick apart the fight scene or look for mistakes. I wouldn't want to do that. I like to keep it kind of positive and enjoy it.
Now, for something like Netflix Daredevil, you mentioned the hallway scene. What goes into a scene like that as far as prep from where you're hired to where it's actually put on camera?
Yeah, I mean, we had a couple of days of rehearsal for that. A scene like that to be shot with no cuts. I think it might have taken us like 15 takes over the course of that night. And some of that is the choreography itself, but then you add in the camera as basically an additional piece that needs to be choreographed, and a vital piece at that, of course. That is a whole other level of just one more piece of the puzzle. And knowing how we did our rehearsals with Phil Silvera basically holding doing a handheld camera shot, stepping over us as he's kind of as the fight choreography is going around and we're all getting individually knocked out, and he's kind of dancing around as if he's the camera rig that we're going to be shooting with. That was pretty damn impressive as well.
Wow, that scene is so iconic.
It was really, I mean, we knew when we were working on it that it was something special.
But I remember when the first trailer came out and it showed, I think it was the first trailer showed that scene, and it was just, my God, continuous shot of just mayhem.
Yeah, what was great is that I got to work on Bushwick shortly after we did that, after that first season had concluded and had been released by Netflix. And the sort of part of the shooting style for Bushwick was everything was a oneer, and they were just kind of stitched together based on little hidden cuts. Mm-hmm. So I was the stunt coordinator for that, and it really was a blessing to have had that experience working with Philip Silvera when we did that hallway stuff. So I had a real understanding just after a couple of days of rehearsal and a couple of days, just the one day of shooting. Had got a real education, at least a short form education into how you need to open your mind up to do those types of shots, because working in stunts, and we had stunt doubles that we had to switch in and out, and trying to figure that stuff out so that the camera work could work for a oneer was just tricky, but just a wonderful challenge. I mean, we do these, by the time we got to Bushwick and we were shooting stuff that had to do with stunts, we might do a 2-hour rehearsal right there on the street, getting the camera synced up with the actors' movements, and then figuring out, are we switching in a stunt person to double Brittany Snow or anything like that, or any of the other people that we used doubles for.
Dave Bautista's such a nice guy.
He was amazing. He was so awesome.
I had a chance to interview him.
Did you?
2 years ago, red carpet premiere Stuber. And then from going from that to to TV, is there, well, Netflix is TV, but going from something like John Wick to the Blacklist, is there a big change in how, the unions have things set up, or how you're able to do things, or is it pretty much the lines kind of not there when it comes to being different from TV to film?
Yeah, I mean, in that regard, the union's the same, right? It's all the Screen Actors Guild, and now with the after merger and things like that. But I mean, the way that fight team, the 8711 guys, the way that they operate is just, that's hard to match. In terms of preparation, rehearsal time, and just the amount of time that they put in by themselves in terms of developing the choreography. A television show's not going to take that time to do choreography. And that's generally the biggest difference, I would say. They just don't have the time to do it. I mean, the fight team from Daredevil was absolutely super talented, but they're a TV show with a different type of budget and a much different schedule. So to think that you could get more than 2 days to rehearse a 5-minute fight scene or whatever that was for the hallway, you're not going to get much beyond that.
Does that lead to different risks or different perilous positions that you're putting yourself in by not having that?
No, I mean, I've always, and I haven't choreographed fight scenes like either of those examples. I think a lot can be accomplished in 6 hours, but that's, either that's a low budget type of thinking, or, more of a television background, coming from more of a television background. But it's like anything. I mean, the more you practice something, the better you're going to be at it. And if you can justify having, a month of rehearsal or whatever it is, leading up to, and that's all part of, pre-production planning, really. It's part of the 8711 pre-production type of process. It's just so much smoother. And, the guys from that team know, they know pretty much everybody's fight choreography. So whether it's their part or somebody else's, they know exactly where everybody's going to be, during that particular shot or fight scene.
Is stunthood, or being the stuntman, is that kind of a brotherhood and sisterhood, or is it a competitive job market, or a little bit of both?
It's definitely both. Absolutely. Not everybody gets along always, or sometimes not ever. And that's based on competition and personality and lots of things that could go into that could kind of factor in. But I think when it comes down to it, everybody wants to go home safely. And for the most part, we want to spread you want to be able to spread the work around and see that everybody who can work is working, and so in that regard, and when they are working, they're doing it safely and they're doing it well. So yeah, in that regard, it is that brotherhood, sisterhood type of mentality.
Now, when you're doing stunt work for like Ryan Eggold, and you're doing it for multiple episodes, are you paying attention to what's going on with his character, or don't you really care? You're just thinking about the next stunt and how to do it safely, or what goes into your surrounding environment, I guess is the word I'm looking for, as far as what's going on? Does the storyline mean anything to you? Are you trying to figure out, or is it just you're focused on your stunt, and then when they yell cut and put Ryan back in?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I might have kind of two answers for you. For me, I think it was, a little more simple in terms of just kind of doing the bits that I was there to do, the stunt part of it. But I also know that, if you're really, really, if you're really involved in doubling that actor. The proper thing to do. I mean, I would pick up if Ryan's character was supposed to have an injury or something like that. That's something that we would be discussing and would figure out kind of how to do it. In the example of working with Ryan, those are things that we both kind of work together on. It's like, how would we do this? And, a lot of it for me was like, well, what feels comfortable for you? And I could try to match that. We had moments like that. I would say, the better approach always is to be able to match whatever your actor is doing as closely as possible. And a lot of times that presents itself, whether it's, somebody running, just simply running, but also, left-handed, right-handed type of action, things like that, are other examples.
And then for a show, like I saw that you were on Bull once. We were brought in for one episode. Is that kind of a fun new, this is a new day and a new job for one? I mean, how does that kind of contrast the opposite spectrum of things? Do you like doing stuff like that? I mean, I know the paycheck would be nice to have a regular, guy that you're mimicking like with Ryan, but do you enjoy those kind of one-offs where you go in for something and kind of meet everyone and kind of do your thing, or is it kind of just another day in the office?
Yeah, I think it more feels like, this is another day on a different job, and, tomorrow I'm going, back to the Tonight Show, or, maybe I'm off for a couple of days, and the following week I'm, back at Blacklist, or, something else. Just sort of dropping in from day to day. I mean, the crews that are working TV shows and films that are coming into town, generally there's some recycling of people. So, you might recognize the hair and makeup people from one job to the next job, even if you're in for a day here and a day there. There's a lot of familiarity with the crews. So it kind of just feels a lot like it's, it doesn't even matter so much that it's a separate job, whether it's Bull or Limitless or, any of the other ones that have kind of dropped in for a day here and there.
And is Stuntman, is it kind of a dying breed, or you think it'll be something that's always around? I mean, we're seeing shows like Mandalorian where everything is digital, the sets are digital, the surroundings are digital, and, instead of jetpacking over, 100 feet in the air, they're 2 feet off the ground on a wire, and there's no real risk to them. Are we losing, stunts? Is that becoming a thing of the past, or is it just evolving?
I think it's evolving. I don't think you're losing a lot of that. I mean, there might be a little bit less in terms of, as we talked about earlier, giant crowd scenes. It might be easier to just digitally multiply, this group of 20 people and, make them look like 20 other people over there and 20 other people over in the other corner. And, if you're just doing a lot of that big action scene, crowds and things like that, might be easier to do that type of stuff. I mean, I think, just looking at what the E-series, the E-racing series have made cars look like on these racing simulators, just seeing what's happened over the quarantine, the I-series and things like that. I mean, a little scary to see what they can make a digital car do, and how good that stuff can look. But I think for the most part, there's still a need for stunt people, at least presently. It does seem like the industry is going through some changes, not just in terms of stunts and action and things like that, but in terms of just what's being consumed. Yeah.
I wonder what a show like Person of Interest or like Limitless that are shot, in New York or something, how that would look today in a post-COVID era. These crowded New York streets from Person of Interest, how are they, a lot less crowded. Just because of the risks.
I mean, shooting around the city has always been difficult in that regard. Maybe it's a little easier right now. There's less people, walking around, depending on neighborhoods and things like that. But yeah, the kind of trying to get some degree of control of streets and things like that has always been pretty darn tricky.
And you said you were kind of a generalist as far as the stunts you do. Do you have a particular favorite thing that you enjoy or feel that you're exceptionally good at, or like this is my bread and butter stunt, or
I really liked the fights, and the things that kind of went along with that. So taking the falls, a lot of the body stuff. So again, being an athlete and things like that, I like the physicality of the fight scenes. Working with the guys from 8711 or the Daredevil team, very, very physical type of choreography, and that was always, I really enjoyed that. In terms of individual stunts, I got very accustomed to and kind of learned to enjoy stair falls.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I felt like that was something that, one of the first things I did for Jimmy Fallon back when he was the late night show was a stair fall through his audience, and dressed as Abe Lincoln, and I've kind of loved him ever since.
Huh.
Yeah.
That to me is a little weird, but stair fall. Wow, that's something that just seems so. When you do it right, it's so fluid, but at the same time, it just sounds awful.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know from other like female stunt performers, they sometimes don't have all the luck of being able to protect themselves with under wardrobe and things like that. So I've kind of had it easy whenever I've had to do them. If I've done them again for the Tonight Show in a turkey costume, like plenty of room for padding under a turkey costume. A lot less so if you're supposed to be in an evening gown wearing heels and do a trip and fall down a flight of stairs. It's not as enviable.
And you've spent a lot of time with actors, actresses. Do you ever get the Hollywood bug?
No. I mean, I've had opportunities to deliver lines and things like that, and it was, again, I'd much rather fall on a flight of stairs than have to hit a line or something like that. So that's sort of where I've always kind of had my head.
And for someone younger listening, what kind of advice would you give to someone that wants to be stuntman or stunt woman?
I mean, I would say
it's not something you can really go to college for.
No, well, I mean, there are schools for training and things like that, and that's a great way to get that sort of generalist exposure, or at least skill development. The exposure sort of comes differently. I mean, I'll say this. I know the initiatives that were coming out prior to the COVID outbreak would have made things a little easier for somebody to get into the business. And I think that that's a lot less so now that there are a lot of restrictions as to who can be on set or even around the set, and who can be speaking to who. I mean, it used to be this, the idea was that if you were coming up in the business, you would go and, what's called like hustle a set, where you try to meet the coordinator, the stunt coordinator, or other stunt people that were working that day. Opportunities like that are not, they're not available right now. Nobody wants somebody stopping by and that hasn't been tested and checked and cleared and temperature taken and all that stuff. Nobody's got that kind of access anymore, so it's definitely a little more tricky. But that doesn't make it impossible to come up, because there's always a need for new faces and things like that. I think just excelling in some degree in some skill set would be the best way you could do it. And seeing through parkour and martial arts tricking and whether it's BMX type stuff or something in the snow, snowboarding, snow skiing. There's lots of different avenues and paths for somebody to come into the business. I do feel like there's a little bit of pedigree that now should be presented. I think, so whether that's, we get a lot of gymnasts and things like that, or really excellent martial artists if you're looking in the fight world, or people with like racing backgrounds for driving. Those are just examples of the types of people that are coming into the business and getting into the business. And you see a lot of, again, using the fights as an example, you see a lot of MMA guys kind of moving over as their professional competitive careers kind of start to wind down. They make their way in, and they might be doing sort of that stunt actor type of role, which is really excellent. There's a recognizable face that draws people's attention. If you find out that Andrei Arlovsky is, he did an episode in Limitless, and I got to do some fight choreography with him, and that was awesome. But if you're a fan of him, or you're a fan of that show and you're aware of who he is or something like that, having a name and a recognizable face like that is really it's beneficial for the show and certainly for the individual themselves.
Now, how does like an MMA fighter versus a stuntman, how does that translate over well? Because I would find it to be hard, because MMA fighters are used to connecting, and now you're not connecting. And so that whole kind of muscle memory, that whole kind of instinct, is that a hard thing to do? I mean, I would almost want to train something that doesn't have fight experience to do, fights as a stuntman versus a guy that has experience in beating someone to a pulp. How hard is that to kind of reprogram someone? And is it easier or harder for someone with like an MMA background?
Well, I've only worked with a couple other guys like that. Whether it was Dave Bautista, who, professional wrestler, understands distance and how much force to put behind something, but still make it look like it's full force. Mm-hmm. Just the amount of control that they have of their bodies. Dave Bautista picked me up and threw me around the kitchen of a New York City, Bushwick apartment, like I was a rag doll. Picked me up onto his shoulders and slammed me to the ground, like I was nothing, and did so with enough force for the two of us to, really shake the foundations of the building. But I had no damage. Luckily, we did just one take, and he was happy with it, and so was I. So, but then working with Andrei Arlovsky, I had a number of scenes fighting him just in one sort of group, in one sort of scene. We had a couple of different sequences, and again, just this person, this guy's awareness and of distance and things like that was just phenomenal to me. I mean, we were doing a fight scene where he basically was supposed to be beating me to a pulp, and he was throwing left rights across my face, and barely, he was coming close enough that I could feel the breeze blowing across my nose. And then he, there was body shots as part of that as well. And he was putting them just a touch, and so fast, that, there were points where I really had to change the way I was reacting from one shot to the next. In terms of whether it was coming from, a punch coming from his left or his right, I really had to move with that stuff in a way that I wasn't even accustomed to, just based on his speed. So, yeah, wow. It was pretty incredible.
Nice. Now, so not only do you do stunt work, but now you are co-founder of 1E9 Sports. Tell us a little bit about that and what caused you to branch out into doing something different.
Well, I think the reason why has mostly to do with an injury I sustained back in 2016. doing a stunt, jumping from rooftop to rooftop, and broken ankle that hasn't quite recovered, and doesn't seem like it wants to at this point, 4 years later. So I started thinking about different things that I would want to do, and I almost always go back to athletics. It's just something I love. It's the way I had always kind of trained myself from from being a kid, growing up in Ohio, through my college career, then even moving forward when I first moved to New York, just always training, doing something athletic and sporty. Those are the things I just love to do, and I get a good feeling from it, and want that feeling to continue for as long as possible. But sort of redirected myself with 1E9 after creating this idea for sort of an extreme version of tennis that kind of melds. I call it a hybrid sport. It's the Action Tennis series, where we kind of change the traditional sport
It almost
into
looks
something.
like a game of dodgeball going on in the middle of a tennis match. Is
Yeah.
It's
Got
think of describing it.
Yeah. That is that's pretty accurate. There's a little more to it in terms of what we've changed from the traditional sport, whether it's the scoring structure and the environment that they're playing in itself. A lot more enclosed into a cage, and we got some ramp walls built into the back of the courts. So we're kind of really given it this industrial, gritty kind of aesthetic, and really just kind of looking for a different way to present sports, and that's what 1E9 is focused on doing, is just kind of creating these hybrid sports entertainment properties or competitions that really kind of the premise of what we're trying to do is that today's athletes have evolved, and it's time for the sports they play to start evolving with them. Whether it's football or tennis or basketball or baseball. I mean, a lot of these sports are seeing a decline in their audience, and maybe it's because they've been relatively unchanged for 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of exploring different ways to present sports that people are familiar with, but giving them a much more entertainment-based sort of layer. So yeah, something that kind of fits along the with like professional wrestling or American Ninja Warrior, or even American Gladiators from not too far back.
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
with the injury, is that something that you're looking at getting back into stunt work? Is there stunts that you can still do, or where with the ankles kind of limitations?
But yeah, it's definitely, I am very limited in terms of what I'm able to do, but my driving's gotten better, and
There you go.
fight choreography is still something that I could do, and I am the stunt coordinator for the Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon, and that's there's a fair amount of work that I can still do, but it's not quite
keep you busy.
Yeah. I'm still very much involved in it, and still have a love for it. Although I don't get to do all the fun stuff that I really enjoy.
Is there another stuntman that you've always wanted to work with that you haven't yet?
No, gosh, there's so many great guys, but I feel like I'm sure there are plenty that I haven't worked with or don't really know. If you're looking at the broadest scope of the business, in Los Angeles to New York, and the places in between. As far as stunt people go, no. I mean, I've worked with a lot of guys at a lot of different levels, and you can look at somebody like Simon Crane. I've worked on a couple of shows for him, and his guy Wade Eastwood, and guys like that. And I've been able to been fortunate enough to work with a pretty awesome group all around over the course of my career so far.
Wow. Well, I just want to thank you for coming on. It's been a pleasure hearing about your work. I think it's something that we kind of tend to forget about. We hear about when Tom Cruise does some stunt that's amazing, but you never really hear about the men and women that are doing it on TV or movies, almost every day. I think it's a unappreciated group that doesn't get kind of the full recognition that they should for the work that they do. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Of course. Thank you very much for your time and having me on your show.
Well, thank you. That does it for this episode. Thank you for listening to the Staffa Corner.